I want to move on to the story coming out of Israel. So Donald Trump recently said this, and I want to get your take on this, on whether or not there's any chance for this at all. And as I pointed out to the audience, this is also Joe Biden's policy, even though Joe Biden wasn't necessarily as outspoken as Donald Trump is being about it here.
And people are dying there, so I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing in a different location where they can maybe live in peace. Temporarily, or it could be either. It could be temporarily, could be long term. I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime I believe. And I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing. It's it's over the centuries that's many conflicts that site. And I don't know. It's something has to happen, but it's literally a demolition site right now. Almost everything's demolished, and people are dying there. So I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing in a different location where they can maybe live in peace.
You know what's wild about this, Mark? This is the exact issue that Joe Biden had.
This is we've been talking about since the October 6th attacks, that the only solution on what Israel was saying, getting rid of Hamas and the threat of Hamas and the Palestinians in general, is the ethnic cleansing of Palestine. And that, when he talks about moving people, they're just Arabs, right? Because this is a case of a propaganda point of Israel, and regularly picked up by Christian Zionists in the U.S., right? And Israel's interlocutors in the U.S., that there is no Palestine. There is no Palestinian people. There has never been a Palestine. There is not a Palestine, and there never will be a Palestine. There is only Greater Israel. Right. That is their rubric. They're just Arabs, and they should be moved to an Arab country. Right. That was the rationale behind the original Nakba. Right. The original driving out of the Palestinian people, and everything since has just been a slow settlement by settlement, building by building policy of they call it settlers, right? It's really ethnic cleansing and recolonization of the territory. It's been happening slowly. Now, since October 6th, it's now we're gonna do it all. And this was the policy of the Biden administration, or the Blinken administration, at least. But this has been discussed in the Western press. Blinken went to Egypt and Jordan and tried to get them to open the borders so that the Palestinians could be driven out of Gaza. And then the idea was that Hamas would be eliminated and the territory secured. And at some point in the future, we'll probably invite them back.
Oh, no.
Egypt and Jordan both said, no, hell no. We know what you're doing there, right? We don't like particularly in Egypt, right, which is in a government that overthrew the Muslim Brotherhood, right, in essentially a military dictatorship and seized power. They don't like Hamas, but at the same time, they don't want to be responsible and face millions of Palestinian refugees, more Palestinian refugees in Europe, in Egypt as well. And the same thing in Jordan, even though the Jordanian king is a pet little creature of the West and has long been so. They don't want to be the ones responsible. And the irony of this is it is the Jews who were, the Jews of Israel, I should be saying, or at least the government of Israel, that the Jews were once a nomadic people driven from their homeland, and they want to do the same thing to the Palestinians. Right? That is exactly the cause. And ultimately, if you're fighting a counterinsurgency war against a force, like Hamas, that has by and large the support of the population, that it's really very hard to do it otherwise. to solve that militarily.
Mhm.
Not that I'm suggesting that in any way ethnic cleansing is in any way morally defendable. It is not. It is not a acceptable strategic option. It is a form of genocide that is being talked about here, and that's openly what Trump is calling for. And now we see what the carrot was. Now we, I believe, see what the carrot was that Trump offered to Netanyahu in order to get him to accept the terms of the ceasefire. Remember, I said there was a carrot and a stick, right?
Mhm.
The stick was we withhold military aid, right? The carrot was we increase military aid and we'll look the other way and we'll force Egypt and Jordan and someone else to open the borders, and we'll just drive all the Palestinians out and settle this once and for all.
Well, therein lies the rub. Will
What?
they be able to do that? I mean, therein lies the rub. I mean, when Joe Biden tried to do this, Egypt and then Jordan was like I said, hell no, we're not going to allow this. I mean, does Trump really have that clout to pull this off? I mean, Joe Biden was an extraordinarily weak president.
Yeah, he was.
How do you read this? Do you think there's any chance at all for him to pull this off?
Here's the problem is that Egypt is, in particular, the Egyptian military is a major recipient every year of U.S. foreign and military aid, the largest, right? And right now, Israel and Egypt are the only countries excluded specifically under the foreign assistance freeze, which includes military financing, right?
Mhm.
Separate military financing from actual military aid being delivered from Ukraine, which is a Defense Department matter, right? But the military financing that goes to Egypt, right, that supports their military and long has, right? You can see also Trump doing the same type of thing, perhaps, and attempting to offer his own sticks and carrots to Egypt, although just much more in your face and forcefully than Blinken was able to do. Now, whether that will break down the Egyptian resistance, the Egyptian government, I don't know. But certainly, if he's talking about it, that's what he means, right?
Mhm.
That is literally what he's talking about. So we will find out. Can he bully Egypt and to a lesser extent Jordan into accepting responsibility for the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians from Palestine and the creation of a greater Israel? But I mean, it's the first time that has been said openly by a U.S. political figure. It was always, we know what they're trying to do, and they were
Mhm.
trying to get the border open. Now he is openly talking about just driving the Palestinian people and creating apartments for them elsewhere. I don't know, maybe Mar-a-Lago. I mean
It's a logic issue, right? Like when I
right.
would have Israelis on the show and I would say, okay, so you're not for a two-state, they would say, no, we're not for a two-state solution. We don't believe that Palestinians should get a state. Okay. And you're not for one state. Well, no, because at that point it's not a Jewish state. Okay, so what are you for? I mean, the reality of it is, logically, you're either going to have to kill everybody or expel everybody.
This has been the logic that every Israeli president and every U.S. president has been complicit in for decades now. It was just slow, right? It was house by house, settlement by settlement, right? Drive the Palestinians out. It has always been occurring, right? Now it's just they feel they're up against the timeline and events have led to this point. Now it's just drive them all out. And it's being talked about openly by a U.S. president for the first time ever. But this is not a change of policy. It is only an acceleration and an open admission of it.
What do you think the relationship is between Trump and Netanyahu? There's been some publication that he is not necessarily the biggest fan of Netanyahu for various reasons, but how do you see this relationship? Because the reason why I ask this question is because on some level, look, Donald Trump got a huge amount of money to be obsequious to Israel. And when he got to ceasefire, people were like, okay, well, what the hell is this? And then he played the Jeffrey Sachs thing. And it's like, again, what the hell is this? And now you see this, which again makes sense, right? Hey, give me the ceasefire and I'll let you take all of this. I'll help you get rid of all of these people so you can take all of Gaza. And you can even see something else. This kind of explicit policy of destroying all the hospitals, destroying all the buildings. Like, it was intentional for this effect.
Always
right?
has been.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would imagine on some level the relationship between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, and let me ask this question differently. Donald, who's going to pay for this? Like, meaning this rehabilitation of Gaza, that's assuming that Gaza is rehabilitated.
Gaza is going to be rehabilitated by Israel as an Israeli populated resort, right? They'll pay for it once it's their territory, right?
So, but I guess I could see the other question. Do you believe that they're going to be able to pull this off?
I always believed that it was a slow inevitability, right? That with the geopolitical forces being what they were, no one able to force the U.S. to anything in the Middle East, that the Palestinians were a doomed people in their homeland. I've long believed that. You know, I just thought it would take time. Now we're suddenly, the question is, can Trump get away with doing it on an accelerated time schedule sometime, presumably in the next 4 years? Now, obviously, he has had the Biden administration was stealthily attempting to do the same thing and had no significant opposition from Europe. In fact, Germany and others were just fully anti-Palestinian. You can be arrested in European capitals, in several European capitals, just for flying a Palestinian flag, right? Yep. You know, not a Hamas flag or anything, just for a Palestinian flag over the last few years. So obviously Europe's position has changed to match the US's own over the last couple of decades. Now, the rest of the world, the sane world outside the West, will be horrified, right? The Arab world will be horrified. The other great powers, India, Russia, China, the other BRICS members, South Africa, which, has an open genocide case against the Israeli leaders in the International Court of Justice. Brazil, all of the rest of the world will be absolutely horrified this. But obviously, just by bringing it up, Trump already has plans that he thinks that he can weather it and just bully and order it. We'll see. Trump has a way of making the seemingly impossible suddenly discussed openly, like the Panama Canal in Greenland. And everyone at first is like, he's just joking. He's just trolling. And oh my God, he's not joking and trolling, right? And now, there are this, you could say that this, I don't believe, is a madman theory moment, though, right? He's not playing crazy here. This has long been both Israeli and U.S. policy. It's just now on an increased timetable.
And it's more honest. Like I was telling the audience before you got here, like I said, this was Joe Biden's policy anyway. This is what they wanted. Speaking of that, Greenland. Now, I've had people on the show who said Greenland is going to be in Donald Trump's pocket before Trump's term is over. I don't remember what your answer was to this one, but he seems to be very serious about the Greenland thing. I mean, he was on the phone with the Danish prime minister, apparently in what they call a fiery phone call, and saying that Europe is somewhat disturbed by Donald Trump's take on Greenland.
Yes.
Now, Greenland has come out and said, look, we don't want to be part of the Danish government, nor do we want to be part of the U.S. government, even though we would welcome any kind of, let's say, land exploitation and investment into Greenland itself. Now, Trump's thing is like, you can't defend yourself. You can't defend yourself. So, we need to protect the free world. And in order to protect the free world, we need you to give us Greenland.
The funny thing, of course, the U.S. already has military bases in Greenland. There are already more U.S. troops than Danish troops in Greenland, right?
Exactly. So this is more to do with this, the exploitation of land,
Yeah.
basically getting your hands on
Not
minerals.
just natural resources, though. Geostrategic position,
Mhm.
right? The Arctic, the coming war with Russia for the Arctic, right? Now, look at what Trump is also talking about, making Canada the 51st state. Look at who the Arctic littoral states are. Currently, the U.S. only by a UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and so forth, only has control and access of a small amount of the Arctic over Alaska. Canada has a much bigger portion. Denmark has a fairly large portion north of Greenland, right? But consider that Greenland it's a big island, right? But it always looks bigger than it really is because of the Mercator projection, right? Map. Right, take a look at a globe instead, right, to see the real size of Greenland. Don't be fooled by the Mercator map. Greenland is the most hideously blown out of proportion. Still a big Arctic island, but then Norway and Russia, right? Russia having by far the biggest coastline, the biggest portion of the Arctic. If the U.S. suddenly controls the U.S. portion and the Canadian portion and the Danish portion of Greenland, suddenly the U.S. is a
player in the Arctic.
Is a player almost on par with Russia in terms of total control of the Arctic. And Russia has, of course, already reacted to this and essentially said, we see what you're trying to do there. So all of this talk that that Trump is trying to de-escalate the war in Ukraine, that he thinks it's a waste of money and whatever for the United States. And we're getting all kinds of contradictory messages about this right now and possible deals and negotiations. But ultimately, is Trump preparing for another war with Russia by seizing territory in the Arctic, which many people will think will be the resource war of the future for, the oil and gas reserves that are still in large quantities in the Arctic.
Well, that's kind of my point. That's why I said this seems to be more about mineral exploitation because we already have a military presence in Greenland.
But there is also, let's say that we're putting both anti-ballistic missile, defense batteries and first strike batteries in Greenland, right, against Russia. Think of the strategic advantage against Russia, nullifying any advantage of hypersonic missiles and the like that Russia currently has because of a slight deployed tech advantage over the United States. There is a military and geostrategic advantage for the United States in having that territory. They get to put missiles and have a air defense shield much closer to Russia. Everyone forgets that Russian and US missiles can fly at each other over the Arctic, which is a much shorter distance than across the Mercator projection over Europe and the Atlantic Ocean to the United States, right? Also, of course, across Alaska and Vladivostok, although for both sides, that's both sides backwaters, right? But over the Arctic, that is a much more, when we're talking long-range strikes of one country against each other, we're talking primarily nuclear here. That is very important real estate to have.
Any chance on a new nuclear agreement? And this could be the final question. One of the things that Donald Trump threw out was, hey, I mean, look, he has been very uneven. It's been very bizarre. In one sense, he puts out an ultimatum. In another sense, he says, hey, we should talk immediately. And on top of talking immediately, let's bring in China and let's have a conversation on nuclear armaments. Any chance at all that any sort of negotiation includes nuclear disarmament on both parts, or at the very least, coming down?
Zero, less than zero. No one, none of the great nuclear powers are going to disarm, including Russia. No,
I didn't think so. None of this model,
no. Everyone is increasing, at least in modernization terms, their nuclear arsenal, if not in actual quantitative terms.
Mark Sleboda. Mark Sleboda is an international relations security analyst. You can follow Mark on YouTube at Real Politic with Mark Sleboda. You can also find him on his Wait a minute, I said that wrong. You can follow him on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1. That's what it is. You can find him on his YouTube channel at Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, and you can find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. Mark, man, always appreciate your commentary, man. Thank you for this.
Thanks for having me.
You have a good one, man.